Sheik, what inspired you to build Bay Group International around a more of a, I'll call it a governance focused private equity strategy?
Yeah. So, as a vice president of Bay Group International, the whole idea is governance and execution within the first 100 days. Um, the idea is inspired by Moorish OS, and Moorish OS is a proprietary model that we use to execute those strategies in regards to adding value to the acquisitions that we come across when it comes to our uh, target of the lower middle market. So what that means is, when it comes to the leadership, the board, the advisory board, if it exists, the profits and loss, the debt that they may have, and then the debt that's owed to the companies. That's all assessed through proper due diligence. And when we do that assessment, we're looking at how do we not only scale the company, but how do we provide substance and culture to the business? Because Bay Group International is where culture meets capital. We're the first Moorish led private equity fund in world's history. And, we use our Moorish culture as Moorish Americans, we use our Moorish culture as a leveraged asset. So that is the framework in which we implement that 100-day execution of governance.
Got it. And could you describe the firm's philosophy around investments that drives Bay Group International's approach to acquiring businesses?
The philosophy is, I would say, it's pretty simple. It's based off of fostering strategic collaborations and collaborative initiatives. When it comes to transactional relationships in the business world and in the finance world, it's not something we tend to really embrace. We'll engage with different things like that, but it causes a lot of stagnation. Our founder, president, and general partner, Sheik Aston Simmons Bay, he sees that as something that really doesn't foster the social impact that we see to manifest. And so in other words, our component that we look at is experiential economies. So you're talking about consumer product goods, hospitality, real estate for income producing assets. And I'll take a step back too and dealing with the specific question of philosophy because it's dealing with our strategy and methodology. Before we started the fund, you know, our objective was to again foster those strategic partnerships. So when it comes to individuals that may have stocks and they want to have stock loans, and they want to be able to buy a business, or they want to be able to um, get invest get in a position to invest into various businesses, we got partnered with individuals that do stock loans. When it comes to acquiring businesses, well, instead of just using your own capital, we partner with individuals that provide access to purchase order financing, debt financing, asset based lending. We worked to partner with those organizations that have those resources. So it's building an ecosystem. So we're wanting to, foster something that is associated with sustainability, cultivating an environment that is primed for execution. So it's one thing to just buy a business, do a roll up strategy, etc., or merge a company with another. The stereotypical way that people are involved with the business industry, it's taking a different look. So when you're dealing with philosophy, it's changing the way you think to change your life. And more in depth into that is recognizing the understanding of thinking, reasoning, willing, and understanding. These are the actions of one's actual soul. This is the actions of the soul, you know. And so when we take that perspective in our worldview, when we're approaching a business, it's like, does the person want to just sell the business, or they do want to grow the business? So we may look at a business and say, "Oh, we want this business, you know, fits our target. This is great." But if the person is already having a vision that they want to build their business, but they are open to selling their business, we have a conversation with that founder and see what their goals are outside of just selling the business. Because again, that's just something that's transactional. So our biggest strength that we brought to the fund space was advisory, advising startup founders, various different brands from different parts of the world. And so being creative and agnostic in the space, but plastic in our approach, that's where it lies. You know, so that's the philosophy, is curating approaches that are continuously perpetuating that particular ideal. That's a key point, is how to be strategic, how to be creative when approaching with dealing with financial opportunities, such as acquiring a business or such as scaling the business. That's the philosophy. You know, that is more important than I think most people really value. And so that's what we highlight.
Yes, sir, absolutely. And from your perspective, what makes a lower middle market business an attractive one to Bay Group International?
Yeah. So, you know, when you look at the market now, you know, you begin to see that there are businesses that are becoming a part of the infrastructure of the United States in such a way where them as a business is not really a business at that point, because they are like embedded with the federal government's infrastructure. And so some of those businesses are far too large, and they are, you know, connected to the public's resources, you know, taxes, you know. So with that, it's like, okay, that margin is too high. They're just institutional. They're a part of the bureaucracy now. Then we have the other businesses, you know, obviously just getting started, you know, venture businesses. And so it's like that sweet spot. It's that sweet spot of individuals that have had businesses that started in the 70s, and now their families are not wanting to assist with any type of exit or wanting to establish any type of legacy infrastructure, family office infrastructure. Like, that's not happening. These are baby boomers that have owned these businesses. These are individuals that start a business and then they end up getting a little bit of traction, and now they're wanting to exit and they want to just go into something else and take their money and run, type of thing. And that's a lot of what's happening in that lower middle market space. And so it just makes the most sense, because they are the ones that are lacking the most governance. They're the ones lacking the most infrastructure and systems, especially with AI now. You know, they would be able to benefit the most out of every other portion of the business world.
Got it. And Bay Group International, as I understand it, focuses on EBITDA positive businesses. Why the focus on these businesses versus more speculative or turnaround opportunities?
You want to be able to foster sustainability, something that's also cultivating continuity, you know, because again, when it comes to Moorish culture, continuity and sustainability is a part of the fabric of what the Moors of antiquity built and established, and infrastructure development. You know, if you know anything about the Moorish people, you know, we went into the Iberian Peninsula in 711 AD, and we went in focused on the infrastructure, fostering, you know, irrigation, agriculture, um, the building infrastructure, you know, with construction development. and we also went into, medicine and, you know, developing the sciences of health and wellness, again, providing a system of influence, what some would call influence ecology, to actually make an impact. So much so that the residue of Moorish culture is globally, still in place after the fall of the Moorish Empire in 1492. So the residue is still there, and that's the idea. And the philosophy too is building something that has continuity, longevity, even after you're alive or after you've passed away. You know, that's the thought. That's the thought. Revenue generation. Yeah.
Got it. And from your perspective, what makes fragmented, recession resistant businesses an attractive investment opportunity?
Well, when you have, I'll put it this way, it just goes back again to, you know, using our culture as a leveraged asset. Because of the dormancy of the Moorish culture, it's been non-existent for so long, especially in the United States of America. They have to have the opportunity to see what it looks like. Like when you have been away from something for so long, you really have no perspective of what you're missing out on. And so when it comes to a fragmented business, or when it comes to a business that is not on the incline, we make analysis and assessments though, because even though we did talk about the EBITDA positive, there's still businesses that are out there that I may, examine and do some due diligence on, that I can see the value in there, where the business itself may not see the value, like the board and the executive team, they may not see the value. So it's not only just them being EBITDA positive on the onset, it's them being at that when the execution and the governance takes place. Because you can do some assessments on businesses and see where their trajectory is financially on the financial sheet. That's one thing. But then looking at the assets, looking at the resources that are there, looking at the operations and the systems that may be lacking, it's like, oh, okay, well, we can plug this in, we can plug that in. That's where the Moorish OS comes in. And that's also what assists with those that are emerging fund managers like myself that need a little bit more support. That's where you have Fund Execs OS, which brings the businesses in there. So one thing, to the point of businesses that may be in a specific category, is also about cultivating an atmosphere for misrepresented startup founders to be able to get to that place where they are 1 million EBITDA and plus, and then help advise them and get them to the next level. So it is, again, going back to the operating system, and we have our criteria, but it's also recognizing where we can extract the value and uplift the operation, because especially when it's not there, when it's not there, and it's missing out on, the growth potential. That's what we want to lock in on that. So I don't want to misconstrue that. We have, our focus targets, but as far as for me, when I look at certain businesses, it's not just, oh, this business makes this and that's it, because that would be a poor example of due diligence. As the vice president, doing due diligence is paramount. Examining everything, doing analysis, what's there, what's not, who are their partners, who are their contracts, why have they not been paid on this, why have not been paid on that, and do an analysis and get the full scope to then be able to make a final decision, say, oh, it's not going to work. However, we have these resources. So then 3 years down the road, they may be in a position where we could acquire the company and put in our portfolio, you know. So it definitely is a broader perspective when we're dealing with these different components, such as Moorish OS, which is the proprietary system that we have, and FundExec OS, which is the public facing component that we have as a product from FundExec Technologies on a part of our portfolio. So, and then of course the philosophy of strategic partnerships. So thinking with a different set of eyes and being open minded uh, is really how these partnerships are fostered. That's how it's put together. So I hope that answers your question on that.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. And how do you guys evaluate businesses to figure out whether they have the right foundation in place for long-term value creation?
Yeah, that area outside of due diligence is more of a strong suit for our president. You know, his background and as a bachelor's and I believe a master's in business administration and marketing. You know, because he's able to kind of do what I would consider alchemy. You know, looking at something from a perspective that someone would say, "Oh, this doesn't have any value," and saying, "Well, what about this thing right here?" and extracting the value. So that approach of his leadership is what I've been learning. To be quite honest with you, and it served me a great deal in my public, ventures, running for mayor or public office for the city of Portland and running for school board, and now on the equity committee for the local Centennial School District here in Portland, Oregon. So, as far as that particular question, I would have to lean and yield in humility on his leadership because that is the doorway to execute on that particular question because he's the one who's leading the charge on that.
Got it. And what role does governance play in creating value for these different portfolio companies after you guys acquire them?